there! Today I will be sharing 35 of my all-time favorite quick and easy dinners with you. These are dinners that I can make week after week and we just won't get tired of them because they are seriously that good. Let's get to my kitchen and let's get to cooking. I really love this one, so to start us off today, we are making this one pot easy sausage pasta shells. So to my large pot on the stove, I'm adding in 1 pound of Italian sausage. You could use any type or any brand of sausage you like. Break the sausage up and cook it through at this point. Then once your sausage is cooked through, just remove any excess grease from your pot. Now add in a dash of salt and pepper and about a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. For the pasta, I am of course using pasta shells and I used about 10 ounces. Next, add in a 24-ounce jar of marinara sauce and then fill the jar up with water and give it a shake and then add that water in. It's about 3 cups of water total. Give this a stir and then you are going to let this simmer covered for about 10 to 16 minutes. You do want to stir it occasionally just so the pasta doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot and burn. But once the pasta is tender, you could serve this up. Here's my plate of food. I topped mine with a little bit of fresh basil and Parmesan cheese. This is so delicious and very easy to make. And if you didn't want to use sausage for this recipe, you could always use ground beef or ground turkey as a substitute, or you could always leave the meat out. If I was stranded on an island and I was allowed just one pasta salad, I think I would choose this taco pasta salad. It is that good. So to the pan on my stove, I added a pound of ground beef. I'm going to break it up and cook it through. While it is cooking away, I'm going to start on the pasta. So to this pot of boiling water, I'm adding in 16 ounces of rotini pasta. I'm just going to cook it according to the package instructions. Now that my ground beef is cooked through, I added in a third cup of water along with 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning. Give this a stir and then let this cool down completely. Now that my pasta is completely cooked through, I'm just going to strain it over the sink in my over the sink strainer. And then I am going to rinse the pasta with cold water just to help it cool down completely because you don't want your pasta hot when preparing it in your bowl. So now over to my large bowl, I'm adding my cooled down pasta in there along with the cooled down ground beef mixture. Next, you're going to want to add in a drained and rinsed can of black beans along with a drained can of corn, 2 cups of shredded iceberg lettuce. I do suggest you using the iceberg lettuce because it's super crunchy. Next, add in 1 cup of diced tomatoes, a half a cup of sliced green onions, 1 diced avocado, 1 cup of crushed nacho cheese Doritos, and then the last thing you're going to add in is your dressing. I definitely recommend you using this creamy French dressing. I used 16 ounces of it. It just gives this pasta salad so much great flavor. I know it's a little bit different type of dressing, but it is so good. Give this a good stir. You know how some pasta salads are kind of boring and dry? Well, this one is not at all. It has a nice crunch from the Doritos, and then all of the different flavors in this pasta salad make it 10 out of 10. It is so good. Now we're making this yellow chicken curry with rice. So to my big Dutch oven on the stove, I'm adding a tablespoon of olive oil right in there. Once my oil was hot, I added my 2 pounds of cubed chicken breast along with 1 yellow onion that I diced, 1 red bell pepper that I diced, and then a teaspoon of curry powder. Curry powder is very strong, but it doesn't really have any sodium in it, so you're also going to want to add in a half a tablespoon of salt and then a teaspoon of pepper. Cook this on your stove for about 3 minutes. The chicken will not be completely cooked through at this point. So after the 3 minutes of cooking, remove the chicken to a plate. In the same pot that we just cooked the chicken in, add a cup of uncooked jasmine rice, followed by 2 cups of chicken broth, 1 cup of water, and then for the seasonings, a half a tablespoon of salt again, a half a teaspoon of pepper, and then 2 teaspoons of curry powder. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you're going to want to give this a stir and you're going to want to add back in the partially cooked chicken from earlier. And since the chicken is not cooked through and neither is the rice, they need to cook through at this this point. So we're going to let this simmer covered for about 15 to 18 minutes. I did stir it occasionally just so the rice didn't stick. And once the rice was tender and the chicken was cooked through, you're going to want to add in a half a cup of coconut milk right now. This is the brand that I'm using. We really like it. And if you don't want to use coconut milk, you could always use heavy cream as a substitute. Also add in your fourth a cup of cilantro, give this a stir, and then you could serve this up. This dinner is so flavorful. It really is easy to throw together, and if you've never tried chicken curry like this before, I really suggest you doing that. We serve this alongside of some naan bread. This is the brand that I just bought at my Walmart. It really is good. We like to heat it up either in the air fryer or the oven. Now we are making this pesto orzo casserole, and this one is a meatless meal for all of my meatless meal friends. I'm starting out by cutting up a yellow squash, a zucchini, and I'm dicing a yellow onion into smaller pieces. I have a greased 9x13 baking dish right here. I'm adding all of those vegetables right in. Next, add in 2 tablespoons of olive oil along with your seasonings. This is a lot of seasonings, but this casserole is really flavorful. So a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, then a teaspoon of dried oregano, a teaspoon of onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and Italian seasoning. Give this a stir to coat the vegetables in the oil and the seasonings. Bake this in a preheated oven to 400 degrees for about 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes is up, just remove this from the oven. Next, you're going to add in the remaining ingredients. So toss in a tablespoon of minced garlic along with a 15-ounce can of drained corn, then 16 ounces of orzo pasta. I'm excited that Walmart has like its own great value orzo now. They didn't used to at my stores, and this one is quite a bit cheaper than like the other name brands. But now I'm adding in 8 ounces of basil pesto, then add in 3 cups of water, or you could use veggie broth if you would like. Give this a stir and then cover this tightly with foil. Bake this in a preheated oven now to 350 degrees for about 35 minutes. After that cooking time is up, remove this from the oven, remove the foil, and then give this a stir. If you're a cheese fan, sprinkle on 3/4 cup of mozzarella cheese, then bake this for an additional 10 minutes or until the orzo is tender and the cheese is melty. If you're a pesto fan like me, you are absolutely going to love this one. This one is also great for like meal prepping it if you want to meal prep it for the week. And if you don't want to make this a meatless meal, you could of course add chicken into this and it will be good, but we absolutely loved this one. It was so delicious. Now we're making these classic sloppy joes. I haven't made sloppy joes in so long. To the pan on my stove, I added 1 pound of ground beef. I broke the ground beef up and I cooked it through. Once it was cooked through, I of course removed any excess grease in the pan. Then I added in 1/8 cup of brown sugar and 1/8 cup of yellow mustard, then 3/4 cup of ketchup. I gave this a really good stir and I let it cook together for a few minutes. It really can't get any easier than this. So to assemble our sloppy joes, first you will grab a regular hamburger bun and then fill it up with that sloppy joe mixture, and then it is time to serve it to my family. So this is how I served it. That sloppy joe mixture is rich and bold tasting. It is so good, and you cannot even believe how simple it is to make. I served it alongside of this suddenly salad. It's really easy to make. And then I had strawberries on hand, so I also served it with strawberries. Now we are making this sheet pan quesadilla, so over to the pan on my stove, I'm adding 1 pound of ground beef just to break that ground beef up and cook it through. If you don't care for ground beef, you could always use like ground chicken or ground turkey or any meat substitute. This recipe is actually in the sheet pan section of my cookbook. It is on page 84, and if you didn't know, I recently came out with my first ever cookbook, and it has 8 sections and over 100 recipes recipes, and the sections are ranging from like easy breakfast, side dishes, extra quick dinners, desserts, and so much more. I have my cookbook linked below this video for you if you haven't gotten one yet, but now that my ground beef is cooked through, I added in 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning and a half a cup of water. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove for a couple of minutes. After that time is up, add in 1 drained and rinsed can of black beans, or really any beans would work, and 1/4 cup of salsa. You could also add in a can of corn that's drained if you'd like. Give this a stir and then remove it from the heat. Now heading over to my sheet pan, I'm spraying it with plenty of oil spray. You could use any type of oil spray you like. Then use 6 burrito-sized tortillas and kind of slightly overlap them and place them onto your sheet pan. And then the last tortilla, make sure you place in the center so nothing falls out. Sprinkle 1 cup of Mexican-style cheese over the tortillas. Then sprinkle that taco meat mixture over the cheese. You could also add on like sauteed vegetables at this point, or really add anything you'd like into your quesadilla. Sprinkle another cup of Mexican style cheese over the top, and then place another tortilla in the center of your quesadilla. Fold the edges in, and then spray the top of your quesadilla with more oil spray so it gets crispy. Place a second sheet pan over the top of your quesadilla and bake this in a preheated oven to 425 degrees for 20 minutes. Remove the second sheet pan, then broil it for 1 to 2 minutes so it gets really crispy. The fun part about these quesadillas is you could top them with anything that you'd like. Also, you could fill them with anything that you'd like. So they are so adaptable. You can make them your own so easily. I have changed these quesadillas up so many different times for my family based on what we have on hand. Now we're making this chicken and yellow rice casserole. So into this big bowl, I'm adding in a 9-ounce bag of yellow rice. Next, add in 1 1/3 cup of water. Then 2 10-ounce cans of cream of mushroom soup, or you could use any cream of soup or a homemade version if you'd like. In the back of my cookbook, I actually have a homemade version that you could use, but just whisk this together super well until it is well combined and it looks like this. Over to my 9x13 baking dish, I'm going to spray this with nonstick spray just for easy cleanup in the end. I'm going to pour the rice mixture right in there, and then on top of the rice, I'm going to add my 1 pound of thin sliced chicken breast. I'm going to season the chicken with a little bit of salt, pepper, paprika, and onion powder. I don't need to season it with like a ton of things just because that yellow rice is super flavorful. I'm covering this with foil, and this will bake in a preheated oven to 325 degrees for about 1 hour and 15 minutes, or until the rice is tender. Here's my plate of food. This is such an easy casserole to make. It has such minimal ingredients, and this is kind of like a pantry staple dinner. So you could kind of keep these ingredients on hand for those weeks when you don't really know what you're going to make for dinner. I also serve this alongside of a side salad. You are going to love these Italian chicken sliders. I serve them alongside the easiest couscous recipe in the world. It's so good, but we're starting on the chicken sliders first. To this bowl, I added in a half a cup of Italian dressing, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of pepper. I gave this a really good whisk. This is kind of like the Italian sauce. Over to my slow cooker, I'm spraying it with nonstick spray. Then I'm adding in 2 large chicken breasts. Over the chicken breast, I'm adding 1 drained can of petite diced tomatoes. Then I'll add the Italian sauce over that. This cooked on low for about 5 hours. While this was cooking away, I did start on the couscous recipe. I don't want you to miss out on this recipe. It's just amazing. To the pan on my stove, I added 2 tablespoons of olive oil along with a tablespoon of minced garlic. I gave this a stir until the garlic was was fragrant. Now I'm adding in 1 cup of pearl couscous. It kind of looks like this. I just get it from Walmart, nothing too fancy. Now I'm going to give this a really good stir and let the couscous cook for about a minute or two. Then I added in 2 cups of chicken broth along with a dash of pepper and salt. Then the juice from 1 lemon. I am going to give this a stir and let this simmer covered for about 15 minutes. Now that the simmering time is up, I'm going to stir in about 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese, let the cheese melt down, and then that is all you have to do for this couscous recipe. It tastes like $1 million, but it truly is that easy. But now that my chicken is finished cooking in the slow cooker, I'm starting on my rolls. So I'm just using kind of like brioche buns for the rolls, but you could use any type of slider rolls you like, or like dinner rolls, anything. But I placed them on my sheet pan, then place some mozzarella cheese on the inside. I am going to put this under the broiler for a couple of minutes to melt down the cheese. While that's in the oven, I am shredding up my chicken. I'm shredding mine with my electric hand mixer just because it's easy like that, but you could shred your chicken with 2 forks or a meat masher. Here are the rolls out of the oven. I'm just going to place that chicken on the inside, and then that's all you have to do. I really enjoy making my family these Italian chicken sliders just because they really are that easy to throw together. They come together with very minimal effort, and if you don't typically cook with couscous or you haven't made it in a while, I definitely suggest you making this recipe. Now we're making this teriyaki chicken casserole. So on my cutting board, we're going to start out by cutting up our vegetables. I diced a yellow onion and a red bell pepper. Now I'm going to cut 2 heads of broccoli into smaller pieces. I have a 9x13 baking dish right here. I sprayed it with a nonstick spray. Next, I added in about 1 pound of cubed chicken breast. Now add those cut up vegetables right into your baking dish. And I found some carrots in my fridge last minute, so I sliced those carrots into smaller pieces. It's about 1/2 cup of sliced carrots. The carrots are optional. You don't have to add them in if you don't want to. Now I'm adding in 3/4 cup of teriyaki sauce. I'm using the Panda Express teriyaki sauce. I found it at Walmart, but any brand of teriyaki sauce will certainly work. Give this a stir so everything is coated well. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 40 to 45 minutes, or until the chicken's cooked through and the broccoli's tender. Here's my plate of food. We served ours alongside of a bed of a little bit of steamed white rice. This is so flavorful and good, and I love this recipe because you can make it your own by adding different vegetables if you'd like, subtracting different vegetables, really doing what you want to it. It's so good. This is a cheese tortellini with spinach. This one is also a meatless meal for all of my meatless meal friends. To the pan on my stove, I added about 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. I stirred it around until it was fragrant. Now I'm adding in a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes along with 1/2 cup of heavy cream. Give this a stir and bring this mixture up to a simmer. Once this does start to simmer, you're going to want to add in your seasonings. So for the seasonings today, I used about 1 teaspoon of dried basil, 1/2 teaspoon of dried oregano, about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and a dash of salt. And then you'll want to add in your vegetable broth. So I added in 1/2 cup of that, along with 2 cups of fresh chopped spinach, and then 9 ounces of fresh, or you could use frozen cheese tortellini, and then 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. Give this a stir and let this simmer covered for about 10 minutes. You do want to stir often while it's simmering, just so nothing sticks to the bottom of your pan. And then once your cheese tortellini is tender, you could serve this up. Both of my daughters just love this dinner so much, and I love that I could put so much spinach in this recipe, and then it wilts down so small my kids don't even really notice that much, but it has a ton of great flavor. I could eat this over and over again. Now we're making this orzo with a rich and creamy sauce, and if you know me, you know by now how much I love orzo, and I'm going to tell you why I love it so much here in a moment. But to my large pot on the stove, I added in 1 pound of ground beef beef and 1 yellow onion that I diced. I'm just going to break this ground beef up and cook it through. If you have a lot of excess grease in your pot after the ground beef is cooked through, just remove it. But next add in 1 tablespoon of minced garlic along with a teaspoon of salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, dried basil, and oregano. And like I said before, I'm going to tell you why I love Orzo so much. So just a little bit of Orzo goes a long way. So for this recipe, I'm just using 1 cup of dried Orzo. So I added that Orzo in, and that is going to feed my family plus give us some leftovers for lunch the next day. So you don't have to use a whole box of Orzo, just a little will go a long way. That's why I just love it. Well, enough with my Orzo talk. I also added in a cup of beef broth, 14 ounces of tomato sauce, and a cup of heavy cream. I'm going to let this simmer on my stove for about 3 minutes. I did stir often just so nothing burned to the bottom of the pot. After that time was up, I added in my 3/4 cup of water, 2 cups of fresh chopped spinach, and 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese. I'm going to let this simmer covered for 8 more minutes, just until the Orzo is tender, and you do want to make sure you do stir it often while it is simmering. Like I said before, you just don't want the Orzo to burn to the bottom of the pot. This is one of the most delicious, richest dinners, and I do want to let you know, if you don't want to use ground beef in this recipe, you certainly don't need to. You can make this with sausage as a substitute, or you can make this with ground chicken, ground turkey, or any meat substitute like tofu. Now we're making these taco stuffed peppers, and to get this recipe started, you'll need about 2 cups of cooked chicken. I do want to show you how I'm cooking up my chicken in the Instant Pot. It is so easy to do it this way. I added my big frozen chicken breast along with 1 cup of water. I set the valve to sealing, and I put this on high pressure for 23 minutes with a quick release, and then there you go. You have really easy to shred chicken. But if you don't want to do it in the Instant Pot, you could always use a rotisserie chicken for this recipe, or you could boil your chicken over a pot of water on the stove. But I set our chicken to the side to get started on the bell peppers now. I have 6 small to medium sized bell peppers. I cut the tops off and I removed the insides of the peppers. I am going to bring them over to my pot of boiling water, and I'm going to let these bell peppers boil in there for about 6 to 7 minutes to let them get soft. While we have our peppers cooking away, I'm going to start on the filling now. So to this large bowl, I added in our shredded chicken. Next, add in 1 cup of drained and rinsed black beans, 1 cup of cooked white rice. And here's my little trick that I've been doing recently. They sell these rice containers at the grocery store. They're pre-cooked rice containers, and when I only need a little bit of rice for a recipe, I like adding these in just because it's so simple, and so I don't have to cook rice on the side. It's just less effort for me in the summertime. Then I added in 1 cup of salsa and 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning. Give this a really good stir to combine the ingredients. Now that we have our bell peppers nice and fork tender, you do want to make sure they're only fork tender. You don't want them to be too soft so they're falling apart, but I added them into my large casserole dish. Now generously fill our bell peppers with that chicken mixture that we just made up. And I do want to mention to you, if you want to make this into a meatless meal, it is so easy to transform this recipe to a meatless meal because all you have to do is substitute the chicken for more beans. But I topped our bell peppers with a little bit of pepper jack cheese, and I baked this on 400 degrees for about 20 minutes to melt the cheese down and to cook a little bit. Here's what they look like out of the oven. The outside is perfectly tender and the inside is spot on delicious. I also love how you can make this recipe your own so easily. You could always add ingredients to it or subtract ingredients to kind of just make it the way you want it. Now we're making these fall off the bone tender baby back ribs. So to begin, we are going to start on the dry rub. In this little bowl, I added 3 tablespoons of paprika, a tablespoon of salt, a half a tablespoon of pepper, and 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. Mix this all together. You'll want to use between 4 to 5 pounds of pork ribs for this recipe. Go ahead and rub the dry rub all over the front and the back of the ribs at this point. Then brush on about a cup of barbecue sauce. You could use any type of barbecue sauce that you love, but I went ahead and used the Sweet Baby Ray's brand. Now that I'm finished brushing on our barbecue sauce, I'm going to place the ribs in the slow cooker. So they're going in the slow cooker standing upright with the meaty side against the inside wall. And then I poured on about a cup more barbecue sauce. Over the top of everything, I poured 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar. This cooked on low for about 7 hours or until my ribs were fall apart tender. Corn on the cob is so perfect at this time of year, so I'm showing you my favorite way of cooking it in the Instant Pot. It's so easy. I add my trivet, then I add my 4 pieces of corn. You could use however many pieces of corn that you want. And then I add a cup of water, put the lid on top, and I cook this on high pressure for about 4 minutes with a quick release. It cannot get any easier than this. Your corn will come out so juicy and delicious. I grabbed my ribs out of the slow cooker, placed them on a sheet pan lined with parchment paper, and you see the ribs are kind of broken apart just because they are that fall apart tender. They didn't stay together. Anyways, I just poured some barbecue sauce over the top, and I'm going to place this under my broiler in the oven for a couple of minutes to kind of like make the barbecue sauce on top a glaze. Here's the finished product. Those ribs are like melt in your mouth, buttery good. I cannot even explain them to you. You definitely have to try this one. I served it, of course, alongside of our Instant Pot corn on the cob and mashed potatoes. This is a wonderful summer meal. Now we're making this chicken cordon bleu casserole, and woohoo, let me tell you, this is not your boring type of casserole at all. None of these are. To begin, to this medium-sized bowl, I added in a 10-ounce can of cream of chicken soup. Next, add in about 1/3 cup of water and whisk this all together. This will kind of form a sauce. I'll set this mixture to the side. I pulled out my 9x13 baking dish and I sprayed it with nonstick spray. I added in 4 cups of cooked shredded chicken. I just cooked my chicken up in the Instant Pot, then shredded it from there. Now I'm going to be adding some slices of ham on top. This is just sliced deli ham, but you could really use any type of ham you like. You could even use like cubed ham, but I just used Black Forest ham. Over the ham, add slices of Swiss cheese. And then over the Swiss cheese, you are going to pour the sauce that we made up with the cream of chicken soup over that. The last couple things we will do is first add a box of stuffing mix to the top. I'm just using the stovetop chicken flavor. This will add a really nice crunch, you gotta trust me. And then over the stuffing mix, you'll just add 1/3 cup of melted butter. Cover this with aluminum foil and bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 40 minutes. After 40 minutes of baking, you will just pull this out of the oven, remove the foil, and let this continue to bake for an additional 20 minutes. We like to serve this over a bed of white rice, but you could serve this over egg noodles or mashed potatoes, really anything you'd like. I also served this with steamed peas on the side, but seriously, you guys, you need to give this recipe a try. I know this one might seem a little bit different and odd, but just trust me, you will devour this like I do. Now we're getting started on this Parmesan chicken pasta. So to this pot of boiling water on the stove, I'm adding in 10 ounces of penne pasta, or you could use any pasta that you would like to or have on hand. Over to the pan on my stove, I'm going to add in a tablespoon of olive oil and a tablespoon of butter. Next, add in a pound of cubed chicken breast along with a tablespoon of minced garlic. Then for the seasonings, I'm adding in a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, a teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder, and then a teaspoon of paprika, or you could really use any seasonings that you like. Stir this around and let the chicken cook through on a higher heat. If you cook it on a higher heat, it will tend to cook quicker. Now add in 1.5 cups of heavy cream with 2 cups of Parmesan cheese. Give this a stir and let this simmer until it thickens. Also, if you want to make this like a sun-dried tomato pasta, you could add in 1/2 cup of sun-dried tomatoes, or if you want to make this Cajun pasta, pasta, add in a tablespoon of Cajun seasoning. But now that my pasta is tender, I just removed a half a cup of the cooked pasta water and I added it into the sauce to kind of thin out the sauce. Let this continue to simmer and then add in the cooked pasta. Just give it a stir to coat the pasta and then you could serve this beautiful pasta up. I could probably eat this every single night of the week and not get tired of it. It really is that delicious. It is so creamy and rich. It is very similar to like a chicken Alfredo, but in my opinion, it has more flavor than chicken Alfredo. You need to try this dinner. You will not be disappointed. Now we are making these cheesy chicken taquitos, so into this big bowl, I'm adding in my 5 ounces of softened cream cheese. Make sure you soften yours in the microwave for a little bit so you could stir it. Then I added in a half a cup of salsa, use any salsa that you like. Then 3 cups of cooked shredded chicken along with a third a cup of sour cream. Then add in 1 cup of Mexican style cheese. This is your taquito filling and it is so good. Give it a stir just to combine all the ingredients together until it looks like this. I'll set it to the side. On my plate right here, I placed a wet paper towel over the plate and then I added about 18 corn tortillas over the paper towel. Cover it tightly with the paper towel and then microwave it for about 2 minutes. This adds moisture to the tortillas and prevents them from cracking and crumbling while you try to roll them. But then place a scoop of that chicken filling inside each corn tortilla and then tightly roll it up. You could either spray the tops of your taquitos with a little bit of oil spray and bake them in your oven or to a pan on your stove. Add in a third a cup of olive oil, or you could use vegetable oil or any oil that you'd like. And then to test your oil to make sure it is hot, just add in a little piece of the tortilla. And once it is like bubbling up, you know your oil is hot. But add your taquitos in and make sure you don't overcrowd your pan. Let them cook on each side for about 2 minutes or until they're golden brown, and I am lightly covering the top with a little bit of foil. This will help prevent from oil from like splattering everywhere. If you have an oil guard, you could just use an oil guard, but foil also works super well. Once your taquitos are nice and golden brown on each side, just remove them to a plate lined with paper towels to absorb any excess oil and set them to the side. Then repeat this process for all of your taquitos. Here's what these look like plated up. You could top yours with anything that you could think of. We topped ours with a little bit of sour cream, lime, diced tomatoes, and avocado. These are perfectly crispy on the outside. They're like oh so crispy, but the inside is so cheesy and delicious. You need to try this one. This one is for all of my lower carb friends out there. We are making these lower carb mozzarella stuffed sausages. I have 1 pound of Italian sausage links right here. I'm using the mild flavor, but you could use hot if you like things spicier, or you could use sweet sausage, really any type of Italian sausage you like. Slice each sausage length in half lengthwise down the middle. This is kind of going to create like a pocket in the middle of each sausage, and then we are going to be placing our mozzarella sticks down the middle. So I'm just using these simple like string cheese mozzarella sticks, but you could use any type of cheese you really like. I do recommend using mozzarella though. Just place the cheese sticks in the middle and then kind of like squeeze the sausage just a little bit so the cheese stick doesn't fall out. I have an 8x8 baking dish right here. I'm going to spray the baking dish with nonstick spray just for easy cleanup in the end. Pour about a half a cup of marinara sauce down and then spread that marinara sauce out. This will help the sausage not stick to the bottom of the pan. And then place the sausages down and then pour about a half a cup more marinara sauce on top of the sausages. Bake this in a preheated oven to 375 degrees for about 35 minutes. Once the sausage was cooked through, I served this up. I served ours over steamed broccoli, but you could also serve this over egg noodles, cauliflower rice, or in a hoagie roll. That would be really good. Now we're making these mozzarella stuffed mini meatloafs. So I have about 1.5 pounds of little golden potatoes right here. I'm going to cut them in small bite-sized pieces and I'll set them to the side. If you have my cookbook, you will actually find this recipe on page 92, and I'm just making a variation of it today. Into this bowl, I'm adding in 1 pound of ground beef along with a tablespoon of ketchup and 1/3 cup of Italian-style breadcrumbs. And then for the seasonings, I'm using about a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of pepper, and a teaspoon of paprika. Just mash up the ground beef and combine all of these ingredients together. You could use a meat masher or your hands. Now I have my sheet pan right here. I'm using parchment paper just for easy cleanup. Just add those potatoes right onto your sheet pan and then drizzle about 2 tablespoons of olive oil on the top. For the seasonings, I'm seasoning the potatoes with a teaspoon of pepper, salt, onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and oregano, but use any seasonings that you like. Give this a stir to coat the potatoes in the oil and seasonings. Now we are going to make our mini meatloafs. So I have a package of mozzarella string cheese sticks right here, or you could use a block of cheese or pre-shredded mozzarella cheese. I just cut the cheese sticks in half just because we're making mini meatloafs. So now I have our meatloaf mixture right here. Grab a little bit of that mixture and then place a cheese stick in the center, and you want to make sure the cheese stick is completely covered in the meatloaf mixture just so the cheese doesn't spill out a bunch while it is baking. Repeat this for all of your meat mixture. Brush the tops of the mini meatloafs with a little bit of ketchup. This is going to bake in a preheated oven to 400 degrees for about 30 minutes or until the ground beef is completely cooked through. If you've never tried mini meatloafs like this on a sheet pan, you really need to. And if you don't want to add the mozzarella cheese in the middle, you don't have to add the cheese. These are still good without the cheese, but those potatoes are so tender. This meatloaf is absolutely delicious. This one is one of my favorites. Now we're making this French onion chicken. To begin, we are going to slice our large yellow onion into smaller pieces. Over to the pan on my stove, I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of butter. Once it's good and melty, I added our onion in there. We're going to kind of caramelize the onion, just cook it on a lower heat for about 8-ish minutes until it is a nice golden brown color. Then you will want to remove it to a plate and set this plate to the side. In the same pan we cooked the onion in, we are going to sear our chicken. So I have 2 large chicken breasts right here. I seasoned them on each side with a dash of paprika, salt, and pepper. Just sear the chicken on a higher heat for about 2 minutes on each side, so we're not completely cooking the chicken through at this point. Once it's through searing, add the cooked onion in there along with a can of French onion soup. You're going to let this simmer for around 5 minutes. This is going to reduce the liquid down and make the sauce a little bit thicker. Now we're going to add it into a greased casserole dish. Just add the chicken and the sauce and the onions right in there. Just dump it in, go at it. And then over the top, you're going to add some mozzarella cheese. I added about 3/4 cup of that. And I did try a new type of mozzarella cheese today. It was this creamy melt Philadelphia one, and it was a lot creamier, so I did like it and I do recommend it. This baked on 350 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes or until the chicken was cooked through. We served this dinner over mashed potatoes, and we poured some of the gravy that was in the casserole dish over the mashed potatoes. I also served this with steamed Brussels sprouts, but let me tell you, when I tell you that I love a meal, I mean it, and this has to be one of my all-time favorite dinners. I know this is a bold statement to make, but this is phenomenal. Now we're making these Greek chicken thighs. So to begin, I have about 1.5 pounds of russet potatoes right here. I peeled those potatoes and I diced them. I placed them into this large bowl. Now you're also going to be adding in your 4 bone-in skin on chicken thighs. Just toss those in there along with 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, 1 lemon juiced. And I do want to point out to you, make sure you do use russet potatoes for for this recipe, just because the thighs do need longer to cook in the oven and the russet potatoes will hold up better. And then I added in 2 teaspoons of salt and rosemary, a teaspoon of dried oregano and pepper. Then I gave this a stir. We're going to be lining our sheet pan with aluminum foil right now, and I had a really sweet subscriber mention to me a little while ago that the dull side of the foil is actually considered to be the non-stick side of the foil, so I wanted to tell you that just in case you didn't know, and I hope you find that helpful. But I placed the chicken and the potatoes on the sheet pan. I'd sprinkled the top of the chicken with a little bit more oregano and pepper. This baked on 425 degrees for 30 minutes. I removed it from the oven, kind of tossed the potatoes around a little bit, then baked it for an additional 30 minutes or until the chicken was cooked through. And here's the finished product. The outside of the chicken is so crispy. Those potatoes are extremely flavorful. I served it with some steamed broccoli on the side, and if you don't typically cook with chicken thighs, they're a great meat option because they're low budget and high protein. We are making this Philly cheesesteak pasta. Over to my cutting board, I'm going to start out by cutting up my vegetables, 8 ounces of white mushrooms, a yellow onion, and a green bell pepper. Over to the pan on my stove, I have a tablespoon of hot olive oil in there. Then I added all those vegetables in. I'm also going to be adding in a pound of ground beef right now, or you could use ground chicken or ground turkey or any meat substitute. Just break this ground beef up and cook it through at this point. Now over to this pot of boiling water, I'm going to add in 8 ounces of rotini pasta. I found that rotini pasta cooks very quickly, so just cook it according to the package instructions. Now we're going to work on the Philly cheesesteak sauce now. So into this bowl, I added 2 tablespoons of water and a tablespoon of cornstarch. Give it a good whisk. This is going to help thicken the sauce up. Now add in a can of French onion soup along with a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Give this a really good whisk, and I could basically just drink this sauce. It really is that good. It is just like so flavorful. But now that my ground beef is cooked through and the vegetables are nice and tender, add this sauce right in there and give it a little stir. And then once my pasta was cooked through and tender, I just strained the pasta. Then I added the pasta into that pan. Next, if you're a provolone cheese fan, add 3 slices of provolone cheese in, or you could use any cheese you like, or just don't add the cheese in. Give this a stir, let it simmer for a couple of minutes to thicken up the sauce and melt the cheese down. Here's what dinner looks like. This is not your average pasta dinner. This Philly cheesesteak pasta is so unique and delicious. If you're a Philly cheesesteak fan, you are absolutely going to love this one. Plus, my husband said this was one of his favorite dinners in a little while, so that says something. Now we're making this ranch chicken casserole, and I've made this one on my channel in the past, but oh boy, it is so good. I can make it every week and not get tired of it. You'll want to add 3 cups of cooked shredded chicken into a big bowl. I cooked up my chicken in the Instant Pot, then I shredded it from there, but you could also use a rotisserie chicken if you'd like. Next, I added in a 1/2 cup of sour cream, followed by a 1/3 cup of milk. Then I added in 1 can of cream of chicken soup. Then add in 1 can of rotel. Next, add in a 1/2 cup of Mexican style cheese, and for the seasonings, it really is pretty simple, but these seasonings are bold. Add in a tablespoon of taco seasoning and a tablespoon of ranch seasoning. Give this a stir. I pulled out a 9x13 baking dish and I'm spraying it with plenty of nonstick spray. To the bottom of the baking dish, you'll want to sprinkle about 1 cup of crushed Cool Ranch Doritos, or you could use nacho cheese Doritos, whatever you prefer. Pour the casserole right over the top of the Doritos and then spread it out to the best of your ability. Over the top of the casserole, sprinkle about a cup more crushed Doritos, and then sprinkle a 1/2 cup of Mexican style cheese over the top. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Once it's out of the oven, you could serve it up. If you haven't tried this chicken casserole out yet, you absolutely need to. This is the type of chicken casserole where you could eat bowls and bowls of this without realizing you're eating bowls and bowls of this because it is that good. We love this in my house and I love making it for my family. Now we're making these Tuscan pork chops and oh boy, you are in for a treat with this one. I have about 4 pork chops right here, and into this other bowl I added in 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Now I'm seasoning the pork chops on both sides with a dash of salt and pepper. After I was finished seasoning the pork chops on both sides, I just dipped each of the pork chops in that flour and then I just kind of shook off the excess flour. I do want to let you know, if you don't want to do this with pork chops, you could always use chicken breast as a substitute. This would be super good with chicken breast anyway. After I was finished coating the pork chops in the flour, over to the pan on my stove, I added in a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the oil and butter were hot, I added my pork chops right in there. I'm going to sear the pork chops for about 2 to 3 minutes on a higher heat right now. You just want the pork chops to kind of form like a nice golden crust on the outside. This is going to give the pork chops a lot of added flavor. But after I was finished searing the pork chops, I just added them to a plate and set them to the side. In the same pan that I cooked the pork chops in, I added in a tablespoon of minced garlic, 1/3 cup of balsamic vinegar, 1/4 cup of chicken broth, and 2 tablespoons of honey. I brought this up to a simmer and then I added in a 14-ounce can of petite diced tomatoes. I'm going to give this a stir and then I just let this thicken for a couple of minutes. I added back in my pork chops and now I'm going to just coat the pork chops in the sauce and I'm going to let them simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes or until the pork chops are cooked through and the sauce has thickened to the way that I like it to be. Once it looks like this, you could just sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan cheese on the top and mozzarella if you'd like. Let the cheese melt down and then you could just enjoy this dinner. I served ours over a bed of egg noodles, but you could serve this over rice or cauliflower rice for a lower carb option, or you could just eat this the way it is. I also served this with a side salad. That sauce is so rich and delicious. I could basically just drink it. It seriously is that good. Now we are making this chicken bacon ranch tater tot casserole. This is comfort food to the max for me. To the pan on my stove, I'm adding 7 pieces of bacon in, or you could use a 1/2 cup of pre-cooked crumbled bacon that you get from the store, whatever you'd like. Then I'm going to add in 1/4 cup of water to help the bacon cook evenly and get crispy. I'll let the bacon cook through at this point. Now that it is to the crispiness that I like it to be, I'll remove it to this plate and I'm going to set it to the side. Into this large bowl, I'm adding 1 cup of sour cream, or you could use Greek yogurt if you would like. Next, add in a 1/2 cup of milk along with a can of cream of chicken soup, or you could use the homemade version of cream of chicken soup in the back of my cookbook. Now I'm adding in a teaspoon of pepper with 2 tablespoons of ranch seasoning mix. Just give this a really good whisk until everything is silky and well combined. Add in a 1/2 cup of shredded Colby Jack cheese and 3 cups of cooked shredded chicken at this point. You could cook up your chicken however you choose to do so. Give this a stir to get everything coated, and then you are going to set this to the side. I pulled out my 9x13 baking dish and I'm spraying it with a nonstick spray. Add half of this 30-ounce bag of tater tots to the bottom of your baking dish. Now add that chicken mixture right over those tater tots. Just do it carefully. And then over the chicken mixture, you are going to add all of your cooked crumbled bacon. Just sprinkle it over the top. Then over the bacon, add the remaining tater tots, and then over the tater tots, add 1/3 cup of shredded Colby Jack cheese. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 45 minutes. Here's my plate of food. This is total comfort food to the max for me, like I said before. This is really delicious. My little ones just gobbled this up. It really was that good. Also, you could add ingredients to this or subtract ingredients. If you're not a bacon fan, you don't have to use the bacon, of course, but this was really good. Now we're going to make my favorite soup, as one of my little ones calls it. So to this pot on my stove, I added in a tablespoon of olive oil. Once it was hot, I added in my tablespoon of minced garlic, along with a diced yellow onion and a half a cup of chopped carrots. I'm going to cook this together for about 5 to 7 minutes to get those veggies softer. Now I'm adding in 2 cups of cooked shredded chicken along with 4.5 cups of chicken broth. Next, add in a half a cup of heavy cream and 6 ounces of cubed cream cheese. Give this a stir and let this simmer on your stove covered for about 5 minutes. Now that the cooking time is up, I'm just whisking in the cream cheese so it could be incorporated in with the rest of the ingredients and it could become nice and smooth, not clumpy. Now add in your 1 cup of small pasta. You could use any type of small pasta that you like or have on hand. I also added in 1 cup of fresh spinach. I'm going to whisk this well, and you're going to want to let this simmer covered for about 10 minutes. Stir it occasionally until the pasta is tender. But now that my pasta is to the tenderness that we like it to be, I'm adding in my cheeses. So 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese and 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese. Once the cheese melts down, you could really enjoy your soup. At least for me, sometimes when I have soup, I'm just hungry about an hour later just because it's not super filling, but this is the type of soup that is absolutely perfectly delicious and it will leave you full for hours just because it really is more of a hearty style soup. We really enjoy this. Now we are making this lower carb sausage casserole, so over to the pan on my stove, I'm adding in about 1 pound of mild Italian sausage links. My favorite are the sweet Italian sausage links, but my store didn't have them, so just add in 1 pound of whatever type of Italian sausage you can find at your store. After you add all of your sausage in, go ahead and add in 1 red diced bell pepper. If you don't care for bell pepper, you don't have to add it in, of course, but just break the sausage up and cook it through at this point. Once you have your sausage cooked through, remove any excess grease from the pan. My mom taught me this trick years ago. Just take a paper towel and wiggle it around in your pan until the grease is gone. It works super well and it's my favorite way to absorb any excess grease. But after you do that, add in 5 ounces of softened cream cheese. Just stir that cream cheese in until it is incorporated well. Now over to a large bowl, add this sausage mixture right in there. After you add in about 20 ounces of riced cauliflower. Then add in your Italian seasoning. I do want to let you know my riced cauliflower was frozen when I added it in. Then add in a half a cup of shredded cheddar cheese and give this a really good stir. This recipe is on page 59 in my cookbook. You'll find it in the casserole section. I have 8 different sections in my cookbook and over 100 of my family's favorite yummiest recipes. I have some cookbooks available right now if you don't have one yet, but just bring this casserole over to a greased 9x13 baking dish after you give it a good stir and spread it out. Then sprinkle 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese over the top. Cover this tightly with foil and bake it in a preheated oven to 375 degrees for about 25 minutes. After the baking time is up, remove the foil and bake it for an additional 12 minutes just to kind of get it crispy on top and finish baking, and then you could serve this up. We served our dinner with steamed peas on the side. My little ones can't tell the difference between cauliflower rice and regular rice. This dinner is really delicious. If you're looking for a lower carb option, this one is definitely for you. I've made it over and over again, and we just really enjoy it in my house. Now we're making these green chili chicken enchiladas. So into this bowl, I'm adding about 2.5 cups of rotisserie chicken, or you could use any type of cooked shredded chicken. Then 1 cup of shredded cheddar or Mexican style cheese. Then I added in 4 ounces of diced green chilies. Those green chilies add a ton of great flavor. They don't add very much spice at all. Then add in 3/4 cup of sour cream with a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and pepper. Stir to combine these ingredients all together, and then once it looks like this, it is ready to go. If you have my cookbook, pull it out because this recipe is on page 71. It's in the casserole section, and this is my all-time favorite go-to enchilada recipe. It's so easy to make. But over to this pot on my stove, I'm adding in 20 ounces of green enchilada sauce. Bring this mixture up to a boil. Now it's time to make our enchiladas, so you will carefully dip each corn tortilla in that green enchilada mixture. This is going to make it so the tortillas don't crack. It's going to kind of make them softer so you are able to roll them. And then add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of the chicken enchilada filling in the tortillas, then roll them up. I made about 12 enchiladas total. I do have a little helper who is just overly excited to help me make this dinner, but pour the remaining enchilada sauce over the top. Now sprinkle 1 cup of either Mexican style or a shredded cheddar cheese over the sauce. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 25 minutes or until the cheese is like golden and bubbly on the top. I grew up in New Mexico and we used to eat enchiladas all of the time in New Mexico. They were just so good there, but this is a delicious, simple, easy way to make enchiladas. These are absolutely delicious and you could top them with your favorite toppings. We topped ours with a little bit of guacamole, tomato, and then some sour cream. Now we're making this Italian chicken and rice, so over to my Dutch oven on the stove, or you could use a large pot. Add in a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the butter is melted and the oil is hot, add in your pound of cubed chicken breast, along with 1 diced yellow onion. And today for the seasonings, I'm using a half a tablespoon of ranch seasoning, 1 teaspoon of pepper, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Give this a really good stir, and then you are going to let this cook on your stove for about 5 minutes. And this recipe is actually in my cookbook. If you didn't know this yet, I just released my first ever cookbook. It's on page 131 and my cookbook is available now for you guys. There's over 8 sections in my cookbook ranging from breakfast, sides to dinners, desserts. My cookbook just has it all and I'm so excited for you guys to see it. But after that cooking time is up with my chicken, I'm just going to add in a tablespoon of minced garlic. Stir that garlic around until it is fragrant. Now add in 1 cup of uncooked jasmine rice, or you could use white rice, whatever you'd like. Then 2.5 cups of chicken broth. Stir this around and scrape those flavorful bits off the bottom of your pot. Now cover this with a lid and let this simmer on your stove for about 17 to 20 minutes. Just stir this occasionally while it's simmering so the rice doesn't burn to the bottom of your pot. But once the rice is tender, add in your 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese and 1/2 cup of heavy cream. Let the cheese melt down and then you could serve this up. I served this Italian chicken alongside of steamed peas today, and this Italian chicken will make your house smell so unbelievably good. This recipe is very easy to throw together. That rice is like so flavorful and so is the chicken, but this recipe is in the one pot section of my book, one of my favorite sections. One pot meals are just so easy to make. And then also in the back of my book, I have included a section for like substitutions for common ingredients that I use that you might not use or you might not have on hand in the moment. So that section's really helpful too. Now we're getting started on these sheet pan fajitas, so I'm going to cut up my veggies first. I sliced 1 red onion, a red bell pepper, and a yellow bell pepper over to my sheet pan. I do have it lined with aluminum foil. I'm adding those vegetables right onto my sheet pan now. Then I'm going to add on 1 pound of chicken tenderloins, or you could use chicken breasts that you cut into thin strips, whatever you prefer. Next, I'm adding on 2 tablespoons of olive oil along with a packet of fajita seasoning. The main difference between like fajita seasoning and taco seasoning is taco seasoning has more chili powder and oregano, while fajita seasoning has more cumin and kind of has more of like a citrusy taste. But I gave this a really good stir and then I baked this in a preheated oven to 425 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes or until the chicken was cooked through. We like to serve our fajita chicken and vegetables in crispy little tortillas, and we love squeezing like lime juice on the top of them. It just makes them taste extra good. I also like to top mine with a little bit of shredded lettuce, shredded cheese, sour cream, and avocado, but top yours with anything that you have on hand. Now we're making this chicken noodle soup, and it's the only chicken noodle soup I make all fall and winter long when somebody in my house isn't feeling the best. So to my Dutch oven, I added in a tablespoon of butter. Once it melted down, I added in 1 yellow onion that I diced, along with a cup of diced carrots and 3/4 cup of sliced celery. I'm going to let this cook for about 5 to 7 minutes. Once my cooking time is up, I added in a tablespoon of minced garlic along with my seasonings. So a teaspoon of pepper, teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of dried thyme, and a 1/2 teaspoon of dried sage. I'm going to give this a really good stir and kind of scrape any bits off the bottom of my pot. Now I'll add in 9 cups of chicken broth, and I'm going to bring this up to a simmer. After this does start to simmer, you're going to want to add in about 8 ounces of egg noodles. I recommend you using these old-fashioned wide egg noodles. I find these at my Walmart grocery store, and they just work the best for this soup. I promise. They're super good. So I'm going to let this simmer for 18 minutes or until the pasta is tender and the veggies are cooked through. Now I'm going to add in 2 cups of cooked shredded chicken. I'm just using part of a rotisserie chicken, or when you add the noodles in, you could add in a chicken breast and let the chicken cook in your soup. Then I added in the juice from 1/2 of a lemon. I'm going to give this a really good stir now, and then I'll serve it up. I make this soup all of the time for my family and my friends whenever somebody needs some chicken noodle soup. It really is so good and extremely easy to make. I did serve this alongside of a roll that I just heated up in the oven. I really like this brand of rolls. They come out super good. This one is for all of my meatless meal friends. I think you are going to love this minestrone soup. I've been making it this way for years and years. I'm starting out by dicing 1 yellow onion into smaller pieces, along with 3 carrots, 1 medium-sized zucchini, and 2 ribs of celery. Over to the large pot on my stove, I'm adding in a tablespoon of olive oil, and once my oil is hot, I'm just adding in the onion, celery, and the carrots, not the zucchini. Cook these vegetables together for about 5 to 7 minutes to soften these veggies. After they are soft, you'll toss in some seasonings. So just toss in about a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of pepper. Now add in your 5.5 cups of vegetable broth, along with 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes, 14 ounces of tomato sauce, and then 1 can of drained and rinsed kidney beans. You'll also add in the zucchini that we cut up earlier at this point, and the rest of the seasonings. So add in a tablespoon of dried basil, 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, and 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. Give this a really good stir, and you're going to want to let this simmer on your stove for about 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes of simmering, just remove the lid, and you're going to toss in a 1.5 cups of small pasta. I'm just using like Tortellini pasta, but any small pasta would work. Let the pasta cook for about 10 minutes or until the pasta is tender. Now that the pasta is tender, the very last thing I'm doing is adding in 2 cups of fresh chopped spinach. I gave this a really good stir to let that spinach wilt down, and then I served this soup up. Here's my bowl of soup. I love topping mine with a little bit of Parmesan cheese on the top and fresh parsley. This soup is seriously 10 out of 10. I can make this like every single week and not get tired of it. Of course, I don't do that, but it really is so delicious. Now we're making this orzo with chicken sausage and broccoli. Just trust me, it is so good. I'm beginning by cutting my chicken sausage into kind of like half moons like this. I'll set it to the side. We're going to work on the broccoli now. So I have 1 large head of broccoli right here. I'm cutting it into smaller florets. Over to the pan on my stove, I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Once my oil is hot, I'll add the sausage right in there, and you're going to want to sear the sausage on each side. It's going to create a lot of added flavor, and it's just going to be extra good like that. So after the sausage is a nice golden brown color, I added in the broccoli along with a tablespoon of minced garlic. I'm going to cook this all together for about 4 to 5 minutes. After that time, my broccoli is starting to get tender, and then I'm going to add in about 1 cup of uncooked orzo. If you don't typically cook with orzo, the best way I could describe it to you is kind of like a mixture between pasta and rice. It really is good. But then I added in 2 1/3 cup of chicken broth. I gave this a stir, scraping all the flavorful bits off the bottom of my pan. This cooked on low, simmering for about 10 to 12 minutes with the lid on. I did stir it often while it was simmering just so nothing stuck to the bottom of my pan. But once my orzo was tender, I added in my 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese. Once the cheese melted, I served this up. This is such a great balanced meal. You got your veggie in there and the protein. Also, this just cooks on one pan on the stove. It really can't be any easier than that. We also had some leftovers, so I had this for lunch the next day too, and it was just as flavorful. Now we're getting started on this broccoli chicken Alfredo. Over to the pan on my stove. I have about 2 tablespoons of hot olive oil in there. I'm going to be adding my chicken right in the pan. It's 2 chicken breasts. I did slice my chicken breast in half horizontally, just so the chicken cooks evenly and quicker. Season the chicken on both sides with a dash of Italian seasoning, pepper, and salt. Go ahead and cook the chicken through at this point. While the chicken is cooking away, we are going to start on our pasta. So to this pot of boiling water, I added in 16 ounces of mini penne pasta, but you could use any type of pasta you like. Cook the pasta according to the box instructions. But now that my chicken is cooked through, I'm just removing it to a cutting board and cutting it into bite-sized pieces. Over to this super duper large bowl, I added in our cooked strained pasta, followed by our cooked chopped chicken. Next, you're going to be adding in about 12 ounces of steamed broccoli. I just bought one of those freezer bags of broccoli and then steamed it in my microwave, and then I chopped it from there. Now I'm adding in 1 cup of mozzarella cheese, followed by about 36 ounces of Alfredo sauce. I used one of these large family-sized jars and a half. Give this a stir. To my 9x13 baking dish, I added our casserole right in there, and then I spread it out as even as possible. I sprinkled about 1 cup of mozzarella cheese over the top. I covered this with aluminum foil, and I baked this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, I removed it from the oven, I removed the foil, and I baked this for an additional 15 minutes, and here's the finished product. Typically, I'm not the hugest fan in the world of those jars of Alfredo sauce just because homemade is so much better, but it definitely works for this recipe. That chicken has so much flavor and so does the pasta, and it's not dry, which is a huge plus for me. I served it alongside of sourdough garlic toast. You're going to be so surprised when you try this taco salsa chicken. It is so good. To this big bowl, I'm adding in a pound of chicken breast that I cubed. I'm also adding in 1 red onion that I cubed as well. And then for my potatoes, I'm using 1.5 pounds of little golden potatoes that I cut into small bite-sized pieces. Next, I tossed in 1 red bell pepper that I chopped and 1/3 cup of salsa. You could use any type of salsa that you like or have on hand. Now I'm adding in a tablespoon of taco seasoning, and I'm going to give this a really good stir to coat the chicken and the veggies in the taco seasoning and the salsa. Now I have a sheet pan right here that I lined with parchment paper. Just add the chicken and veggies right onto the sheet pan and spread it out to the best of your abilities. This is going to bake in a preheated oven to 400 degrees for about 30 minutes or until the chicken's cooked through. Here's my plate of food. You could top yours with any type of kind of like taco toppings that you enjoy, but I topped mine with shredded cheese, guacamole, cilantro, and lime. This is extremely flavorful. Also, this is why I love sheet pan meals so much. It's just because they're so easy to throw together and so good. Whenever I'm hosting or I'm going to somebody's house and I have to bring a dinner, I almost always bring these barbecue beef sandwiches because they're so easy to make and just about everybody loves them. So we're starting on the dry rub first. In this little bowl, I added a tablespoon of brown sugar, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, a tablespoon of paprika, and then a teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder. Last, a teaspoon of chili powder. Give this a really good stir, and now I pulled out my large chuck roast. I did cut my roast in half just so it fit in my slow cooker better. This was a really big roast. I'm going to sprinkle this seasoning mixture all over the top and bottom of the roast, and then I'm going to add it right into my slow cooker. After you add this into your slow cooker, put the lid on top and let this cook on low for about 7 to 8 hours. I have been making this recipe for years, and this recipe is on page 157 in my cookbook. There is a high quality color photo for every single recipe in the book. There's over 100 recipes and 8 different sections ranging from breakfast to sides, dinners, desserts, and more. This cookbook seriously has it all. It's linked in the description box, and if you already purchased one, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys all so much for supporting me for these last however many years. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you. But now that the meat is tender, I am going to remove it to a plate, and I'm going to discard the liquid from the slow cooker, and then using my meat masher, I'm going to shred the meat up. Make sure you remove any of the fatty pieces from the meat, but now that it is nicely shredded, I'm going to add in a cup of barbecue sauce. You could use any type or any brand of barbecue sauce that you like. After you give this a stir, let this cook for an additional 30 minutes. This is going to make the meat extra tender, and it is just going to make it extra good. But I served ours in like a roll with a piece of cheese, but you could serve yours in a baked potato. You could eat this meat alone, eat it however you choose to do so. I also served it with some wild rice that I made up on the stove with broccoli and cheese. If you want that recipe, let me know in the comments. I hope you found something for yourself today, and make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.